It's September 17th, 2021. This is Linguistics You Can Use. A special welcome to a couple of new subscribers we have out there. Welcome to the channel. I'm glad to know that there's a few other, people out there, weirdos like me, who are as interested in talking about linguistics and language as I am, right? Yeah. We got a good community here. I like it. It's fun. So, last week I actually did answer a viewer's question. She was dealing with fears of public speaking, mostly public presentations, new job, new raise, yes. Um, a raise she attained, and she was worried because she was going to be all of a sudden responsible for giving a lot more presentations to her team and blah, blah, blah. And you can watch it. It might be interesting to you, who knows? So I was thinking, it is a very common fear of our public, our humanity, human peopleness. Of one of the most common fears that we come up across again and again is uh, the fear of public presentations. So I thought, why is this? A big reason, the fear of judgment of others, right? Banishment. I've brought it up before. Um, there is a kind of an instinctual fear of not being a part of the group. So the idea that we put ourselves on display and put ourselves in a vulnerable position to be judged by others, it feels instinctual. Yeah. So I think also that comes from the, just the nature of people and humanity and the way that we have come to be at this point in as a species, that we weren't really taught how it's possible for others to hear our words, right? I am talking very specifically, obviously, about the culture that I was raised in, but I've done history. I have some religious studies in my college years. I wrote papers, about historical events. And there is this, I feel, consistent theme that comes up that you want to reach, right, the most people possible. And there's this sense that there is one way that people are. Right? There are deviations from this norm, but you really want to find the norm because that's what probably most people fall into. So most people start out directing their words, right, at this general audience, this generic general audience, as if that's the best way to reach people, which it's not, right? Yeah. If you know anything about public speaking or about presentations, about marketing or anything, right? The best way to get your product in front of people is to connect with a very specific part of them. I am particular here in my linguistic frames, how I approach education in various topics. I come at it from a linguistic perspective, right? So, um, the the idea that I should tamp down the way that I am because I might alienate people who aren't really interested in being here anyway, it's not good. It's not effective, right? So, you, the people who have been loyal viewers these last few months, right? You're interested in this subject, specifically linguistics, how it affects our world, how language creates our world, right? And in me teaching it. And I appreciate that. Thank you for being here. I have a style, others don't. I hear that often. And a lot of that is due to my life experiences, right? I've discussed this in previous streams. Feel free to go through the archive. It's a good time. Good background music. I put on, stuff occasionally in my background videos because at this point, as I'm recording this, we're entering our second, third year of pandemic. yeah. We've been through pretty much a full year, 2 full year. Yeah, we're about a year and a 3/4 of pandemic. Um, so it's been, we're a lot of isolation. The words. This is a joke a few weeks ago. Apparently, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent because it's a live stream, and why not? And, if you hear a clanky noise in the background, please, I live in a city. I apologize for any uh, background noise that happens. Just, imagine you're hanging out in my living room with me. I mean, hey, the way that my setup is, there very well might be a live audience here eventually. Anyway, that's when we're not in a pandemic. I actually didn't. Oh, it was something about isolation. So I have discovered, right, teach due to my life experiences. That's what I was talking about. And the life experiences that we're going through right now are a lot of isolation. So I have uh, been using these experiences over the last few months. Wow, I really did trail off into the ether of tangents in that one. I'm sorry. The trucks that go by are a bit distracting to me. If you can't hear them, it's very good, and I apologize that I bring them up if you can't hear them, but that is a bit of what our subject is about today. So, I have a style, right? Others don't. I do know I said that. And that is due to my life experiences, right? So the way I use sound, the way I use words, and how I manipulate those words with my vocal tract, you know, it's picked up by your oral sense. And something about it fits, right? That's the key of communication, really, is there is a connection, and it's a very ethereal connection, right? Nobody really understands why they like somebody just because versus not somebody, even though the two people aren't really that dissimilar, but there's just something about them that there's just, and it could be for a variety of reasons. And some of those reasons are very prejudicial based on, you know, atavistic is the term, but that's a very specific term, but it's basically, instinctual, right? It's that sense of like, I've been taught this person is bad for whatever reason. So even though I don't consciously dislike them, there's something about them that makes me uncomfortable. So I don't like them. And I don't know why. And that makes me uncomfortable. So I'm going to direct that anger at that person. That's a very common thing right now in our culture. And that's a thing we're going to talk about, as a matter of fact. Um, so yes, the fitting, that's where that came in. So the fitting of communication styles, right? So something about me teaching linguistics to you works. Something about you not liking somebody because they're too quiet or they're too loud, too talkative, too interrupty, not interrupty enough, right? All of those things are based on uh, the way that you pick up sound, right? So I thought it was worth knowing, right, how the holes on the side of our face work. Now, wait, they're really more barrels than holes because there's like the eardrum that keeps the inner ear safe, but yeah, no, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take a look at a diagram of the ear that I got prepared because I'm getting better at this communication thing and figured out that preparing is good. So, to the ear. Here we have the ear in Spanish. I was doing my, search, and the Wikimedia image came up. Oh, and I would like to thank Lars Chitka, Alex Axel Brockman, Perception Space, The Final Frontier, A Plus Biology, Volume 3, Number 4, E137. This is a Wikimedia Commons image, and I appreciate it being so easy to find such a what is it? Comprehensive image of the ear. Okay, so here we have the inner ear. Well, the ear, actually, it's not quite as detailed as it can be. I actually have a more detail or a scientific, you know. Anyway, let us discuss the ear. How do we hear? This is actually content from the National Institute of Health, and they have a great little fact sheet about how the ear works. So, if you have taken basic biology, you probably have an awareness of the eardrum, right? The inner ear and the outer ear. But actually, there are three parts of the ear: the middle ear, inner ear, and outer ear. So, um, there is actually the English version too. I downloaded both of them and I was going to go back and forth because they're fun. So we have here, oh, and the other one has the, the colors, right? So I think each of different languages had a different kind of like vibe to it. So if you look at all of different language diagrams that exist on this thing, it'd be worth, checking out and seeing how they vary. So anyway, we are here in the ear, and we here have the outer ear, right? This is what everybody sees. This is what everybody thinks of the ear. And then down this hole is where all the wax comes, which is we'll get to. And then we have this little oval thing called the tympanic membrane, otherwise known as the eardrum, right? So these are all the very like scientific technical terms. But actually like the average terms, there's not a lot of average terms for the inner stuff because most people don't think about that, but the outer stuff, obviously, this is the eardrum. The tympanic membrane is the scientific name. We have the ear canal, right? External auditory canal, and the outer ear, otherwise known as the auricle, right? So that's how we get the sense, the oral sense, right? So we have the ear. So I'm speaking, and your ear is picking up vibrations from whatever device you happen to be listening from. And actually, if you put your hand in front of whatever device you're listening to this from, this is actually especially pronounced on my phone. I can feel airwaves, right, coming at me when I am listening to something because the channel, the space where the sound comes out of is so small and direct, the air comes out of it very forcefully. Versus if you have a really big surface area, you don't really feel the airwaves. But depending on the frequency, right, very high versus very low, right, low stuff, that's where you could get the vibration. So there are other vibrations at high. Aural senses are weird. Anyway, let's get back to the diagram. So we have the eardrum, and you really should be careful of this, right? This is where we say don't put anything smaller than your elbow down your ear canal, because if you damage this, it is almost impossible to fix, and it is bad. It protects your middle and inner ear, and your middle ear is actually a vacuum. Yes. Uh, so this space, right, that's why I was saying it's basically a barrel, right? So this space is filled with air, and it is at a certain pressure that when the air drum is vibrated, this little bone here, these are the cutest little bones. I think, are these the tiniest bones? I think this right here, the estribo, the incus, the stapes, is the smallest bone in the body. Yeah. But these are bones. They're just real, and they are attached very by these little tiny, sensors, and they vibrate very, very sensitively. So Malus and Incus, these are the what are they called? The West Huesacillos are like the beating sticks, drumsticks, right? So yeah, so these are the little sticks that beat on your drum, or actually that your drum beats on to vibrate your inner ear. And this is the part of the inner ear that most people have heard of, like the cochlear. And this is the part that a lot of people hear about because it is one of, I believe, the first ways that people with hearing disabilities were able to obtain some sense of the average hearing ability. But even still, cochlear implants aren't quite how, the average person hears. So it is there's a lot of controversy around uh, using cochlear implants and what age and all of that stuff. And that is something that I'm going to let somebody in that community discuss because I don't know a lot about it. I'm here to discuss how the voices that I send at you are affected, right? These are biological processes happen. And then our brains interpret those biological processes based on our life experiences, right? So I'm gonna read. Okay, so we have you've seen the Spanish version. You've seen which parts, right, are the inner ear, the these bluish areas, inner ear, right, and then the middle ear, where we get all of our vibratory stuff transferred from the outside to the inside. We have to have this little space in the middle to protect our brain, right? Because we have to have it all sealed up. We don't want anything to be able to get into our brain. Um, yeah, those are the parts that matter for our purposes today. So let's check out that NIH. Yeah. So how do we hear? So this is, very much a more simpler. Oh, look at that. We have a illustration showing parts of the ear, including the inner ear. From the outer ear, the inner ear consists of the ear canal and eardrum. Past the eardrum is the malleus, incus, and stapes. Further inside the ear is the cochlea. The auditory nerve leads from the cochlea to the brain. It's just a great overview. And even if 2015, it's still valid. It's totally, this is how the auditory system works generally. Okay, so we have, yes, the fluid inside the cochlea. Okay, so we have the bones in the middle ear to amplify or increase the sound vibrations and send them to the cochlea, which is filled with fluid. Yeah, the three tiny bones in the middle ear. I actually do tend to read these kinds of uh, things in a very strange order, right? Like I skip around a lot, and then I will, once I have different parts of the story that I want, I'll read it all the way through so I can take a better understanding of it. So if you ever feel like you have to read something all the way through in the way that somebody else formatted it, do not believe that, because that is not how our brains work. We need to attach our brains to the areas that are interesting to us, and then we can hook on all of the rest of that stuff to the core of our interest. All of the things that are kind of monotonous or doesn't really tickle our brain, we can get to that. We've got to tickle our brain first. So the inner ear is complicated, right? There is a lot of aspects of the ear that can work, not work, works, in ways that you don't really can't even imagine, right? It's a complicated part of our body. And if you really want to get into this, I wanted to show you a very technical, very specific uh, site. The Open Anatomy Project has a bunch of atlases of different parts of the body. Oh no, I meant to. Oh, I thought there was just a menu. But anyway, different parts of the body, and that one, what obviously we are looking at the inner ear atlas. So you can use this if you really want to get deep into auditory science, and if this tickling your brain and you're like, what is that? I want to play with this diagram. You can launch it. I'm not, because it's a bit resource intensive, and I already have a bunch of stuff open for this live stream. So I just wanted to share that with you, that there is a lot of resources out there for people, for you, if you're interested in going down this path. So we return to me. So we got into the, those are the physical parts of our body, of our auditory system. And I mentioned, right, the way that my voice is attractive to certain people, the people who are tuning in here today and every week for a bit. So we see how the biology of our brain works, of our auditory system works, and it is attached to our brain, right? The cochlear nerve, right, is what transfers these sound waves that enter into my ear, and my brain can interpret. So if something in there, right, is different, if it's not used to, right, picking up a particular vibrational difference between a particular vibration, then my brain isn't going to be able to interpret something as meaningful. So obviously, sounds create meaning in our minds based on the abilities of our biology in a lot of ways. And this is true for, even if you can hear the difference between different sounds, the ways that we use words are going to affect it. So like accent, right? There's a lot of differences between how the people in the United States and people in England, the UK, tend to put emphasis on words, right? So when we hear each other, there's often a little bit of a pause before our brain can interpret their accent, their emphasis into the word that we know and what it should be. The more obviously that we engage with, that was what wanted to come out, and neither works. The more we encounter and engage with these differences, the easier it is for our brain to interpret them, right? And so that is obviously a lot of how I started in this teaching field, in terms of teaching people who were learning English how to interpret the nuances of English, because mostly I was working with pretty advanced students, or students who were trying to get from that like intermediate to advanced stage, and they were struggling with the way that they couldn't quite click with the language, right? There was something about the way they were hearing people that made it challenging for them to speak. And so we worked on how they assumed something should sound versus how we, who generally speak English on a day-to-day basis, actually sound, right? And those assumptions being, kind of swept away, not as right bad, just as something that happens when we come into a language, when we're learning a language, right? the uh, ability to, what is it? Ugh, that brain, it does like to go on a little bit of a vacation sometimes. But yeah, our abilities to interpret new sounds is very limited. The only way that we are able to interpret sounds as meaningful is with exposure and use. You don't have to completely change your accent, but being able to practice, right, how somebody that you regularly engage with uses their vocal tract, their tongue, their teeth, their lips, all of those things, if you can kind of get a feel of how they speak, it can help you understand them better because your brain then has the awareness, the knowledge that those sounds mean what the sounds, how the sounds you make, right? There's a connection. It doesn't, we don't have to sound the same. We just have to know what we mean. And this comes up a lot in fiction, right? I love this idea in fiction, or this trope in fiction, right, where one character does not speak the common language, English, right? Usually, the whatever language that the audience speaks, um, and so the one character kind of has to be their interpreter. uh, Chewbacca in Star Wars is a very famous example. And it is that sense of like, you don't need to actually be speaking the same language in order to have a conversation. Just both people have to be able to understand what the words coming out of each other means, right? Either person can be speaking either language as long as the person receiving it understands what those sounds mean. So now we are going to take a little bit of a shift and talk about auditory disabilities, right? I talked a little bit about this when we were, going through the cochlear, diagram of the ear, and mentioning the cochlear implant being one of the most common or most famous, right? Sound aid, hearing aid. Wow. Language, right? It's just interesting. Okay. So it's one of the most famous hearing aids, specifically for people who are profoundly deaf or people who have almost no auditory sensation. So if you notice, I'm not sure actually how the cochlear, that's why I'm not going to go into that. But that is tends to be where people go, right? You think about auditory disabilities, hearing disabilities, and you think of deafness, or older people whose hearing starts to be less attuned, less sensitive, which we always uh, interpret as going deaf, right? There's not a sense that only certain sounds are being lost. It's that all of the sound is being lost. But that's not how it works, right? And that's not how it works for us throughout our life, right? We don't just, lose all of our sounds all at once. I'm not sure actually. I should have looked this up. I just remembered this old wives' tale or this old urban legend, um, how they say one of those things that if you hear a really high pitched whine, that's one of the frequencies of your sound range being lost. I don't know how true that is. I feel like I've heard the same pitch a lot of times in that way. But um, there is something to that, right? There is a disability known as tinnitus, which is, it can be chronic for a lifetime, right? Some people have tinnitus for their whole life and it is debilitating. Some people develop tinnitus and it can fade enough that they don't notice it, or it just, it might just, that particular frequency might just have been turned off by their brain because of that thing. So again, brains are weird. We don't know exactly how things work up here. And all of the things, all of the senses of how we process the outside to, inside, that's still under examination too. So, what was I saying? Yes. So the sense that we have to go deaf, or that deafness is the only, real hearing disability, is obviously very easily, shown not true. But there's also a, a different side to losing hearing, which is someone who has an extraordinary ability to hear. This can be seen almost like a superpower, right? People who have such sensitive hearing that they can hear a particular conversation across the room, amongst the din or whatever. And unfortunately, reality is not that simple. There is quite a big downfall to somebody having an extraordinary ability to hear the things around them. And I may have alluded to it before, right? I get very distracted by the trucks that go around my neighborhood, because I am one of those people with sound sensitivities, right? There's a particular bar restaurant. No, it's just a bar. It's a brewery bar. They invite people, or they invite food trucks to come and serve food around near them. But it's infamous for being just extraordinarily loud and echoey, right? And it is an event space. And there is a lot of people who can't go to this space because the sound causes migraines. And I happen to be one of them. It's something that, sometimes somebody can control. You can use headphones, or you can use, devices to help with those kinds of things. But they can be debilitating, right? Not being able to attend an event for your job could influence a supervisor to give a position to somebody else who was able to come to the happy hour. And that's something that happens often in our culture. When it seems like you can't fit in with the group because you have difficulties or you have challenges, these things are debilitating to a functional life. So, wow, that's not depressing. I didn't want to be depressing. Um, I mean, the disability conversation, right? That is where I wanted to bring the conversation, obviously, but I don't want it to make it as a depressing thing that stops us from experiencing life, because it doesn't. There are accommodations and adjustments that can be made for people so that everybody can participate, right? And when people, when others who don't have as many struggles argue so vehemently against helping, right, a few people, right, or it's amusing that it usually reveals that helping a few people actually generally helped the majority. One of the best examples I always look at is the fight for curb cuts in our public infrastructure in our streets. So, you know, there was no requirement for municipalities or any jurisdiction that was building streets, roads, sidewalks, anything like that, to put accommodations in for people who can't walk, or, can't get down a ledge and then up another one, basically. So, and even a curb, right, can be debilitating, right? It can prevent somebody, a half inch of a curb can prevent somebody from being able to participate because they can't get to the location where something is happening without assistance. And assistance isn't always available. especially in the United States right now. So in the 60s, 50s, there's a great 99% Invisible episode about this. But basically, a group of people in California just started doing it. They started to go into their neighborhood and create cuts from in the sidewalk at corners so that people who were using wheelchairs and strollers and you know people were eventually what is it people realized they could transport things on a dolly or in a cart, right? All of these things became possible because a group of people were fighting for disability rights. Similar thing happened for smoking, right? There was a great controversy in so many places when indoor smoking bans took place. And now it's really considered silly to think about because, of course, right, if you're trapped in a room with somebody who is smoking, you are effectively smoking. And that's rude, right? So it was just it felt common sense to say like no, if you work somewhere and you can't escape and you need this job, exposing you to this poisonous substance over and over again involuntarily, right, is bad. It wasn't even like it that those laws though were initially right promoted by people working in the industry because they were being poisoned by their customers, and then it became a public health. It became a customer health kind of thing as well because it affected more people, right? So it is almost invariably the truth or the way that the outcome happens is that when we look at issues that affect a small part of society, and today we were talking about auditory things, right? You know, there's a biology. We can't get away from the way that our brains and our bodies process external stimuli. When we become more aware, right, that these differences exist, that some people do have a more sensitive uh, spectrum, sound spectrum, or that we do need to think about those without a sense of hearing. More people are able to participate outside of just that small group, right? Closed captions, all of the braille leads to other, features in our built environment that people can look to for indications of how our um, our world is going to work. The specific example that came to my brain was in our train system here in Seattle. There are particular um, mats on the floor that indicate places where doors are going to open, so those without vision, uh, can find the doors without struggling before, right, they can be as prepared as everybody else getting ready to get onto the train. And they don't need this extra helper person, right? They don't need an extra assistant. They can be an independent person using the environment in a different way than the rest of us, right? The majority, yes, we use our eyes, and that's fine. But it's nice to have people that don't use that sense and can show us different ways that we can see the world, right? That we can experience the world. Um, there were these experiments, like, and I'm sure they're still happening, right? Where people like blindfold themselves for a while, or put you know cover their ears, or somehow for a while and experience the world as if they were whatever. And those could be great experiments. You can just practice figuring out how to get around your apartment, right, without using your sense of vision. You can go a whole day, right, without inviting external stimuli, right? I love putting on music and shows in the background while I'm working. But there is a thing about just taking a day and just listening to the world as it comes to you without uh, intentionally, right, putting on music or a show or a podcast or anything like that, and just listening to what is today. It's a great meditation. Meditation doesn't just have to be sitting and trying to empty your brain, right? A lot of times, a meditative experience of putting yourself in the present moment, right, is actually a much more effective way of centering oneself than trying to just empty yourself of anything. Because we're never empty of anything, right? Our brains are always working, our bodies are always working, our heart beats every second of our life until it doesn't, and then, and we can be lucky and maybe get some help with that, but generally, right, our body works every single moment. So the idea of emptying ourselves of thought has always been very funny to me. Um, I prefer to think of it as accepting the the world in that moment, right? Not imposing my thoughts on it, or not imposing my intention on it, as it were. Because, when thoughts come up, those are I feel, what my brain really wants to work on. And I have this moment of being in the moment and thinking, oh, okay, these are the thoughts that are coming to me as I listen, as I focus, as I don't focus, as I just experience this moment. And these are the thoughts that are coming up. Wonder why. Why are those the thoughts that are coming up? And the journey to a greater sense of self-discovery continues. I think that's a great place to end our live stream this week. Yeah, it's fun to just, have a little moment of extemporaneous thoughts, as it were, right? So, thank you once again to our new subscribers. Welcome to Crafting Sound Meaning. Please let me know if there is any area of language that you want to focus in on. Ask me a question of your, how can communication skills improve your life in some way? And yeah, that's all the linguistics you can use this week. I hope that this exploration of the oral sense helps you get out there and have some fun crafting sound meaning. Have a great week.